Hmm.
Thank you all for your patience this morning. Thank you for being to class on time. Is that your trick?
You're welcome.
I do appreciate that. I really do. And I always appreciate when I'm just seeing in the humanness of life and oops.
Mhm.
And human error is kind of natural. I try to go with it more than hide it or anything. So I apologize, and I think I can definitely make up for the time, anyways.
Got plenty to do.
I love to teach, and I think most of you have taken my Ayurvedic intro class. Who's taken my intro class? Okay. Okay. And who knows a little bit about Ayurveda? Okay, good. Okay. So I'm probably going to spend, this is how I'd like to set up our days, and this is what I'm here to teach you this weekend. I'd love to set up just some time, even if it's review. You can't give Vata Pitta Kapha too many times, because there's things to get really secured in your space, like the four main organs of Vata. The two tissues, the four organs of Pitta, the two tissues, and same with Kapha. And so you really can't hear it enough, because Ayurveda is a big part of, if you're really going to dive into the big picture of Ayurveda, there's some memorization that goes along with it, and also making sense of it. It makes a lot of sense, and I try to teach the doshas, the humors, I try to teach them in a way that's very realistic. It's like, air lives in hollow places, hollow organs are Vata. And fire, like butter in a pan. You don't have any fire, and it's going to sit there like a glob. You got too much fire, it's going to be all over the tea kettle, your clothes, the wall, everywhere. Fire spreads, like a forest fire. So it's about assimilating and absorbing. And Kapha is water and earth. So anything that's structural, that has blood running through it, like a lymph duct, cardiovascular blood vessel, or anything that's waterworks related, is going to be Kapha in the body. So I'm looking forward to just doing kind of a slight overview. I won't probably spend the 2 hours I do in my intro. I think we've got more important things we could be spending our time with, and we'll kind of weave it into our class. I won't leave you lost, that's for sure. And then once we've kind of done this nice overview and just explained the differences and the fundamental functions, even body functions, emotional functions, spiritual functions, so we'll look at mind, body, spirit. And then we'll go into really a big part of our topic today is cold, dry, hot, wet. So this is an elemental theory, Ayurveda. And the beauty of this is that all traditional medicines have one thing in common. They're all elemental theory. So you can use Ayurveda, you can look this up in Chinese, Japanese, Native American, shamanism, curanderas, and these are all the things I've kind of dabbled and played with to fill gaps, because they're all a little bit broken sciences. All of them. All of them have had thousands of years of history. And some things have been lost, some things have been held and revered in a higher respect for each one of these medicines. Like Chinese has its amazingness, Ayurveda has its amazingness, But they all have one thing in common, and that's elemental. And so the longer I'm doing Ayurveda, I'm 25 years in, and the longer that I have been doing Ayurveda, the more I realize that not only can you map the body like nobody's business, because everything's symptomatic, and it's all symptoms are broken down into cold, dry, hot, wet. But you can't go wrong because everything's elemental. And so it makes sense. It makes more sense than you're going to expect it to even make. You're going to be, oh my gosh, everything dry is, like things that dry up in a plate of food. It goes dark, it gets crispy, it gets hard, it cracks open. I mean, you look at even food, or you look at the environment, you don't get enough water in a river, it's going to go dry, and then it's, going to be powdery, and it's going to be rougher or more, terrain is going to crack open. And so we're going to be looking at all of these aspects. And really, as much as I teach, now, with all my classes included for my students, for my Ayurvedic program, we're at about 500 hours that I can cover, which is a standard amount. It starts with 250 hours of like Ayurveda, nutrition, looking at aromatherapy and looking at chemicals, plant medicine, the chemicals, break down into hot, cold, wet, dry, grass. Your food, according to its vitamins, minerals, and its alkaline or acidity, break down into cold, dry, hot, wet. Your symptoms break down into cold, dry, hot, wet. Your emotions break down into cold, dry, hot, wet. So everywhere you look, there's this one thing in common that cannot be denied in science, in chemistry, in our functions, in how emotions present themselves, every food, every plant. It all, even the way we dance, shows how cold, dry, hot or wet you are. The way you express yourself, anything. So it's the one thing that is kind of tried and true, and it is, as much as I adore Ayurveda, and it is such a core part of my life, I have to say that I adore Chinese medicine too, and I started in Tibetan medicine, and I love shamanism, I love the curanderas, the American, Indians, all of it is saying the same thing. And all of them found a special little key in their medicine that was really pronounced and made it like its core base. And each one of them has their weaknesses. Like one didn't develop medicine enough, and the other one didn't develop body work enough, and the whole thing is actually a complete science. And I also think it's exciting that most of these were done really, thousands of years ago. I mean, they figured this out. And when you look at that, you have to see that it was because they believed that what you see in the environment, we are an environment. So their whole concept, and this happened all over the world, which I have to tell you is way more exciting than just in India. All over the world. I mean, honestly, they said, I respect this land because it provides me with everything I need. And so I'm going to really honor that I have liquid water in me, and I have earth structure, and I have fire that allows me to be my warrior and go hunt, and I've got the wet emotion to be able to understand that communities need to take care of each other, and you need to know when to cool down, and you need to know when to warm things up and get yourself, little. We say these things in our culture all the time, like, get a little fire under your butt. That's you need a little more pitta. It's like, get a little fire under your butt. You need to motivate. You got to get a move on. And then we also say other things like, calm down or chill out. That's another one where it's like, you're telling them exactly what they need. Chill. You're saying, cool down. And maybe even that is set. And when somebody's really dry, and dry means you're like an empty vessel and you're out in the ethers, you're like, whoa, it's really fun out there, I have to tell you. And it's very spiritually based because it's kind of subtle, subtle cosmic astral body in the ethers. And when we're in that place, we also have sayings, which is, gosh, I feel like a chicken with my head cut off. I'm so discombobulated. Like these are all these ideas that we're realizing we're dry, and wet sometimes is a hard one for people to understand because they don't realize that that's the word of mucus, the word of phlegm, or like think about Kafka's water and earth. Water and earth make money. It may make a great river where water can get from one place to another, but if that water is inconsistent in flow, which is Kafka's concept, flow. If it's inconsistent, you're going to get muddiness, And so that's when you have phlegm, mucus, maybe even weight on the body, or low metabolism, or low circulation. And you're feeling muddy. You're feeling sluggish. You're feeling mucusy. All of these things are more when we are, feeling the excess wet. And I'm really here to make sure that we talk about what's healthy symptoms, like what is a healthy ticking body, like what should it look like when these are all in balance, and then what does it look like when they're imbalanced. So we will be talking more this weekend about negatives. There's no way around it. And it usually always comes up, so I just say it before it comes up. You know, someone will say, it's so negative. I love it, but it's negative. And I say, well, we kind of need to start not avoiding our negatives or our symptoms because we don't know what to do with them. We need to learn the body map again. You know, we need to learn how our body's communicating and speaking to us and be willing to face something that is an imbalance, a negative, and then be willing to do something opposite to change it. If you're too hot, you're going to need cold. You could simply chill out. You could have some, glass of water. That's how we put out fires, water, there's, it could be that. And then you could think alkaline. Anything you can think of that's cold is going to help that body. It doesn't have to be the perfect herb or the perfect meal. Anything like that. It's just going to be a matter of being able to witness yourself in a negative, in an imbalance, and be willing to say, whoa, this is an old pattern. I've been doing this a long time. I'm going to be working on this one for a lifetime. Or, I'm really cold right now and I run super hot. So, I need to shift this before it becomes something. So the more you master this and the more you kind of utilize it, you don't have to master it. The more you utilize the concept kind of as you go to each meal or approach each day, approach each season, you start realizing the seasons are cold, dry, hot, wet. And then you start realizing that like emotions are that way. And then pretty soon our physical body starts taking on that emotion. So we have an outer environment, and then we have our inner emotions, and then those become physical symptoms. And then we have our foods that could change the symptom, keep us balanced. Then we have the supplements that could actually come in and change us when something's gotten chronic or a little out of hand. In Ayurveda, there's actually a baseline thing. There's a 4-tiered way of caring for yourself. I think it's a great way to open up into the doshas here. And we're going to go back to cold, dry, hot, wet all weekend. And it's what I just said, but I'll put it in kind of a simpler term. So there's 4 tiers of health. How do you take care of yourself in Ayurveda? And there's 13 natural urges, and we'll talk about those too. They're very important. So in these 4 tiers, you're looking always at psychological and emotional first. Can you take care of yourself on an emotional level, recognizing where are you and making appropriate changes? Then you have food as medicine. Food is a core medicine in this philosophy, in most all traditional philosophies. Then you have herbs and supplements, which means you're supplementing because your food didn't give you what you need, or you have a food pattern that is going to take longer to change. We want to change them right away. You want to stop eating gluten, but it doesn't mean you're going to stop eating gluten. You know what I mean? So it's like, what do you do in that time when you're trying to retrain cravings, or you've already gotten into an unhealthy pattern with food? You're going to need to supplement. You're going to need vitamins and minerals your body hasn't been receiving. You might need some plant medicine. All of that is going to be third. And then the last picture is, when do you need support? When are you beyond? The first 3 are all considered self-care. The last one is when you know you need a practitioner to support you. And that could be counseling, lifestyle, body work, herbalist, any direction, all room, all levels of practitioners, and then who do you need for what you're going through. But that's how they see taking care of yourself. You look at it psychologically first. You change it with food and medicine daily. It's the one thing we do every day. They actually believe that you only do herbs and supplements when needed, beyond food. And then when do you know to see a practitioner? thing that's not in your book is this 13 natural urges. These overviews. It's considered like the way you stay healthy in Ayurveda. If you took care of your natural urges, your body would be releasing toxins and releasing emotion on demand. And our body knows how to cleanse. And it knows how to replenish. And it knows how to rebuild tissue. And it knows what orifice that it needs to cleanse out of to get things where they need to go. I think we've lost that a lot in our society. We've lost the ability to know that our body knows how to do this. I think there's many reasons for that. One is because we have more, we have more pollution. We have more chemicals that have been made and designed in technology at this point. You know? And so since we have more pollution and we have weaker crops from the pollution, we're not always getting what we need. And that's making things a little more complicated. And then we know that there's more toxins and things moving through us. And so it puts us in this place of feeling like we got to cleanse all the time. We got to like move it out. And I think people forget that there's two sides to what you might need. Okay, you're always going to be looking at cold, dry, hot, wet, but even bigger picture really would be, do you need to build and nourish, or do you need to cleanse? Now, when we're in like Panchakarma retreat, someone's here 3, 5, 7 days at a time, we're like cleansing, making space, filling you up with what you want in your life. Cleansing some more, filling you up. Cleansing, filling, cleansing, filling. Sometimes somebody's got a lot of toxicity. We're like, cleanse, cleanse, cleanse. We're going to teach you how to build when you leave. We got 3 days. You know? And other times somebody wants to cleanse, 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 and detox, and I'm kind of like, you're so cold because you've been detoxing so much. You've done so many bitters that are cold, and you've been eating alkaline raw, and those are cold, and you already had low blood pressure, and you already run cold. And really, they didn't give their body what they needed to change. And so sometimes we're really there to educate someone to say, we got to warm you up, we got to build you up. Like, can you trust the value of nourishment? Which is very much a lost value. The idea that we're going to like replenish and nourish and rebuild and honor and sit and relax and receive is I think probably the most complicated thing at this point in our society. We've got it that's decadent and it's frivolous. And since we're so privileged, which let's be honest, we are very privileged in this society. So we also feel like if we're going to be this privileged, we've got to work, change the world, change the world, change the world. And you got so much adrenaline craziness, including myself. And we have to replenish. We have to be willing to like stop and nourish and like bask in our the things we've created, the things we've actually what am I trying to say? Culminated. All of our things that have become fruition. And I think, often I notice the people that are most depleted and the most wanting to get things done in the world are the ones who just, it's like the value of nourishment is out the door. And they just want to cleanse everything out of their way so they can keep going. And then they're like, why am I so empty? I'm depressed. I hear this a lot, depression. And there's true clinical depression, but I'll tell you what's more common is vata depression. And what that is called is empty. So when you're empty, it's very depressing. It's very depressing to be empty. And so for people who aren't replenishing and looking at that, and they're just thinking cleansing out, pretty soon you kind of empty out and you're just this empty vessel. Or you've given yourself all away and then you're empty. And then we get ourselves in quite the position of like, where's the value of nourishment? So it's gonna come up so much in this weekend. There's gonna be definitely cold, dry, hot, wet symptoms. But I think you guys are gonna be amazed at how much your questions will go back to dry. Not to say that you're not gonna have fire inflammation or mucus congestion but there's so much dry depletion, at this point. Because we're running on adrenaline, our kidney oceans, they're called the oceans of the body. The kidneys, we've used up our water, so we're running on the adrenals that sit on top of the kidneys. Your adrenals do not have to come to your rescue until your kidneys are dry. And there are oceans. And then we're not replenishing them. And then we wonder why everything feels like it's haywire and there's an emptiness. I'm doing so much. Why do I feel empty? This doesn't make sense. So we've really got ourselves into a very depleted state. So these are core things that are going to help you as, because this whole class was designed for you to be able to leave by the end of the weekend and be able to say, I know these symptoms. I'm experiencing this. I'm going to do this.
Yay!
Yeah. It's like I'm trying to keep it really directed in that way. And with that, you are going to have to decide if it's beyond food and medicine. Is it beyond psychology? Is it beyond food and medicine as medicine? Is it beyond supplements, or do I need to supplement here? And then when do I go get help? And do I need to nourish or cleanse? They both have equal value. Equal value. I don't think we're seeing them as equal values. I'm seeing them in Panchakarma. I'm seeing it in clients. I'm seeing it in clinics. Since I've ran this business for 18 years, I'm seeing it over and over and over again. When I help somebody receive nourishment, to see the value of nourishment, they get healthier in a way that the cleanse would have never done it. It's not what they actually needed, and it's just then a matter of education and going the distance with the client. It's really that, going the distance and being like, how can I support you in this? Did you not get nourishment as a child? Was your family about overachieving, and so now you're like, I gotta achieve, I'm gonna achieve. No time to bask in the sun. Again, is that frivolous, or is that medicine? So in Ayurveda, that's medicine. Especially if you put put clay all over your body and then go lay out in the sun. You get cleansed and you get replenished. You know what I mean? You take in all the minerals and all the medicine.
Great
in the
idea.
clay. You sweat through the clay, so you're actually getting this, two-way street of getting cleansed out and getting mineralized in. And that's why they do, I think, so many clays and like extreme amounts of oil. Their idea is to get everything in there so it pushes the toxins out, and then it allows you to land deeper into the core of your humanness. Which reminds me of, when I think of humanness in the body, I always think of Buddha. If you've ever gone to the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco,
Yes.
There's a beautiful room with Buddha. It's amazing. It's really beautiful, beautiful artifacts they have. But you can see the chronological order of Buddha. And something that people don't realize, because I think we all know that Buddha was quite an enlightened man. And he wanted everyone to understand what enlightenment was. He really was on a huge goal. I mean, he knew his dharma. He had a core duty. He was in his path. And he just traveled all over the world, saying everything is elemental. He's the one who did so much of this, country to country, that makes these medicines designed and correlated together. I have to say, as a philosopher, not as a religion. I don't want to go there, but as a philosopher. And when you look at his pictures, there's a reason why his ears get longer and longer and longer. Until they're resting on his shoulders before he died. Okay? So Buddha's main function and what he wanted everyone to understand is that enlightenment was to be human. So what we call enlightenment, we think of light like this, enlightenment. Like, I'm going to get to this blissful place and I'm going to see what I can do to stay there. And then you keep not reaching the goal because you're actually out of your body. And his truth was enlightenment is to be embodied and to be 100% human. Which means you say sorry when you screwed up, and you pat yourself on the back and you give yourself some love when you've done really well, and you learn from your mistakes, which are inevitable, and you turn them into positives. So he believed in dark and light. He believed in negative and positives, moon and sun, masculine, feminine. He believed that everything ran from the right side of your body, which is your masculine provider, to your feminine receiving when your blood is flowing well and your breath is in alignment. That you're in perfect harmony of your masculine, your personal masculine and feminine energy. How much you want to provide, how much you receive. And then when is it time to receive? When's it time to provide? It's a full-on balancing act. He also had the concepts of like, if you're too cold, you've got to be doing hot applications. And if you're too hot, you do cold. If you're too wet, you do dry. If you're too dry, you do wet. And he took this all over the world, this idea that nothing was, everything, I should say, is elemental. And everything is about humanness. And so people think of Buddha as somebody who was perfect because he was enlightened, so he was perfect, because he had really perfect ideas, But actually, he wasn't perfect, and he was known to be someone, and if you look at a lot of the readings, he was someone who apologized regularly, or would say, I would love to say that in a different way, because when I sat with that last night, I recognized that I didn't say it in a way that was the best flow. I'd like to re-say that. He would back up and redo his teachings so that he felt complete. But it meant that he was honoring that there was incomplete. He was incomplete. He wanted to back up and honor and be able to say, I'm going to complete this for myself. And that means, I've been teaching to you, so then it's complete for you too. And so I just love this idea that this long years was more about embodied. He was more and more human, more and more embodied, more and more in himself and in his imperfections. And that's what made him such an amazing human. If you ask me, that's the most amazing thing about him, is that he was just being a human. And he was wanting other humans to realize that we were all human. And we all think the same way. And there is no hierarchy. There is just complete equality, because each person has something to offer, and each person has something negative that shouldn't be offered. It should be recognized by that person. So you hold your own personal awareness of your imbalances, and then you provide what is clean and pure and of strength to the world. So it's very different than kind of how we set things up, where somebody's kind of leader, and then, they're up here, and then there's people down there, and then there's all this imbalance, just totally set up from the get-go, because actually it's an equal playing field. And I know I feel that way in my practice. I mean, I've had some really great teachers, and I think, you guys have had really great teachers too, but my clients have been my best teachers. They are the best. My students and my clients are the best teachers I could ever have. I don't even need to go search for another mentor, at this point. I mean, maybe I'll hit some place in my world where that comes back to me, because I've definitely had core mentors in my life, But my feeling is kind of like, well, everybody becomes the mentor eventually. You just let, I am the mentor to you, you are the mentor to me, and then somebody else comes along and they're a mentor to us. Somebody else comes along, a mentor to the three, and it's just this big growing thing where everybody becomes the equal playing field, where they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. And this is all Ayurveda. I mean, these are foundational concepts of Ayurveda and how they saw what was needed as we went through our life and had to deal with the fact that you're here again and you're human, which can be very hard for some people. Do we all know someone who's kind of like, oh my God, why am I here? Like, I hear this from clients quite a lot. It's just like, oh man, this human thing. I've done this so many times, I'm like over it. Well, you can be over it if you want, but I have news for you. You're in a human body. So, you're here. You might as well see what you need to do with that thought, you know. And then you can help them directly because they just gave you all the answers. That's the imbalance right there. Is helping them come to terms with like their humanness instead of being like, well, I don't know. You know, it's like you have to read it and then recognize it and then choose action. So that's my job this weekend. Help you recognize all the symptoms and then how do you take action?
Are you going to actually talk about the 13 natural urges, or are you just
13 natural urges? I can go over those.
Okay, I just didn't.
I don't have them in front of me, so I'm sure I can spout them out from my brain here and my heart. Bring that in. Okay, so there's some real easy ones like flatulence, passing gas, moving stool, urinating, crying, belching, sneezing, orgasm, sweating. I said crying.
Yes.
Maybe go get my book.
Hiccuping?
Yawning.
And hiccuping?
Hiccuping, I don't think hiccuping is one, and I've often wondered. I wonder why that's not on there. But I think that's because hiccup is more of a symptom than it is an urge. Yeah, yawning is an urge, though. And, yeah, we'll get the rest of the list so we can be complete here. I should have put that in here. That would be a nice little add-on. I'll remember that for next week. And we'll definitely complete that list. But the idea of these, while we're waiting for our little completion, the idea of the 13 natural urges is that as soon as one of these are an imbalance, oh, thank you, you need to turn the page.
Should have them memorized.
Yeah, I should have put you on the spot. Breathing, drinking, eating,
Oh, we didn't think of that.
sleeping, vomiting. You got 13?
Got 14.
So I think flatulence
I
and
have
belching
9.
is probably the same thing.
Nope. Those are separate.
So breathing, drinking, and what? Eating?
Eating, vomiting, sleeping. Okay, so tell me the list.
Flatulence, moving stool, urinating, crying, belching, sneezing, orgasm, sweating, yawning, breathing, drinking, eating, and vomiting.
Great. So sweating is an excretory.
Sleeping. Oh, sleeping.
Sleeping is there. But sweating is actually not one of your natural urges. It's actually your main cleansing mechanism.
So what takes the place of sweating then?
Well, no, I had 14.
Yeah, I had 14. We had to dump one.
Yeah, so if you take it off, I think you missed sleeping for some reason.
Perhaps sleeping.
Here.
Yawning.
It
I'll
was
show you the
before
list.
vomiting when she read it out.
What's that?
Sleeping was before vomiting when DeAnna was reading it.
Yeah.
But these are really important because, like, for instance, I'll see a lot of symptoms that come through, and they're very much what we call like occupational hazards. So I'll check someone's pulse, so they'll be giving me symptoms, and they'll tell me they've had bladder infections for a really long time. I find a lot of irritation on the bladder pulse. And then, I'll say, do you get bladder infections? They'll say yes. And then I immediately say, are you a teacher?
Ah.
Are you in a position where you can't urinate when you need to? And they're like,
Oh,
yeah,
good
I
point.
do this, or this, or, And it's really common. So the more you have to hold your urine because you can't leave kids in a school room, the more you're going to start having bladder issues. The more issues that somebody has with maybe public, moving their bowels in public, or using public restrooms, or like we stop belching. This is why when you go to other cultures, they like belch in the middle of meals, and then they just keep going, and then the cook's like, thank you. You know what I mean? Like belching in India means like you are so enjoying yourself, And so in other cultures, you're on the train or the bus, and all of a sudden someone just farts and moves on, and you're like, oh, okay. Whereas we really hold back these urges. or somebody has, a sexual abuse or has had some kind of trauma, and they don't know how to orgasm, or they're so disassociated from their root chakra that they're not maybe even, honoring intimacy with themselves. And then that's going to cause issues in partnership. And then that's going to create issues around, loneliness or inadequacies. And so a lot of people will ask me, like, why is orgasm on this list? And it's like, well, it's a natural urge. It is considered a natural urge. It doesn't mean you do it on demand, like belching. But it does mean that it's necessary. And if somebody is not doing that, and I find they have a lot of reproductive issues, physically, emotionally, probably both, one goes with the other, But the more they start telling me they have these issues, I might need to ask. And these are core questions to ask yourself. Or if you're going to take this into being a practitioner, you're going to take it into your family or partnership, these are core questions to consider. How private is the person you're around or the client in the bathroom? Or is there stress around that? Do they wait too long? Do they not eat consistent meals? These are the things that start imbalances quicker than anything else. And look how fundamental this is. It's so foundational. It's like 101, simple. Like, you need to cleanse your body through these urges. If you just let your body do it, it actually knows how to stay healthier. So as soon as we start repressing these, is when you're going to start seeing physical symptoms. You're changing the natural flow. If you have air that needs to come up, it needs to come up for a reason. It's trying to get out. If you stop it, you just push that air pocket back down into your body. If stool is the bacteria, your colon is specifically getting stool out of your body to get bacteria out of your body. If you leave that bacteria in you, and that colon breaks the blood barrier, then you're letting toxins sit in your body and seep back through into your blood. Instead of just being like, I'm going to sneak up this person's house. You know what I mean? But that would be more natural for you. It'd be more real, too. And so it's also a matter of, finding the words or finding the grace of being able to say, my abdominal is really upset. I'm visiting you right now, but boy, I'm feeling like something really needs to move. I'm so sorry, I'm going to need to excuse myself. And really being able to do that instead of going through a whole meal because you're over there for dinner. You're eating with bacteria in your body because you don't want to, be seen in your natural urges. So I know this is hard. I know what I'm speaking of is like an art, and it takes time to find the grace of voice or to find the grace of just doing it and belching and being like, oh, moving on, And I'm not saying I'm perfect at this either. I'm not setting this class up that this is everything I do, because this is everything I believe in. This is everything that I come back to when I lose it. But if you think you're going to just gain this knowledge and then everything's going to be great, you're setting yourself up for failure. And I'm totally into moderation. And I'm also into not setting myself up for failure, because there's a lot of health hazards in failure. And we beat ourselves up enough. And we have cultures that are eating so much negative food, smoking, wine, drinking through every meal, chocolate and danishes in the morning, dinner at midnight. That's just in Spain. I just spoke of Spain, by the way.
Oh,
All of
exciting.
that is their daily. And yes, you can see unhealthy people, just like any culture has unhealthy people. But it's amazing how stable they actually can. It's amazing how sustained they are on such what I see is not a healthy diet or way to go about life. It's consistent. They're very consistent, and they are about tradition, and they take that wine in traditionally with their meal, and they spend 3 hours with that meal, and they still siesta. You can't even get a meal between like 3 and 5:30 in Spain. Forget it if you're hungry. If you didn't eat by 3, you were in trouble. Even the farmers markets, I mean, everything closes down, you know. So it's consistency, not taking in guilt, and they are also a culture that definitely doesn't have much problem with partying or belching. They may not be quite as outward as India or Asia, but they definitely have a different comfortability around their natural urges and their needs in the moment, you know, and they give themselves a little more freedom to do so. And so it just shows how much we've set up this good and bad and this idea of guilt and failure. And it's affecting us very deeply. And it's not allowing us to be real. And again, it's not easy to just attain this. So this is kind of like a nice, good, like optimum goal, but I think optimum health is quite risky business. It's an optimum idea, but it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to be attaining. So if you could kind of leave this weekend with the concept that you're not attaining perfect health or optimum health, you're actually just saying, I'm going to witness where I am as I go through my life, and I'm going to make the changes accordingly. I'm just going to change according to where I am. And if you start just changing and letting yourself off the hook and just changing, I'm not breathing again. I've been practicing breathing for 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
And I still can lose my breath because it's connected to my nervous system.
Ah.
It's the closest thing connected to your nervous system. Of course your breath is going to change. You can beat yourself up for not knowing how to breathe, or for you keep holding your breath, or you can just keep going back to it and being like, I stopped breathing again. Adios. I'm going to take a full deep breath. I'm going to get back into my process. I'm going to take 10 deep breaths. I'm going to get back into my process of breathing. I'm going to let my belly expand again on my inhale. I'm going to let myself release on my exhale. And I'm going to wait till I feel like I've gotten back to this really nice place, and then I'm just going to be like, okay, on I go. It takes a moment of time. But instead, we kind of like, I know, I never breathe. You know, or someone says, take a deep breath, and you're like, you know, and it's just kind of hard to get down in there and take in nourishment and just receive, like, wow, I lost my breath. I want it back. I'm going to just reclaim it. I'm going to bypass the guilt, bypass the life, you know. Or we process it in to the ground, which is kind of an issue for privileged cultures, where then we make it this big 30-minute conversation and process around where you lost your breathing and what happened when you were little and and then all of a sudden you're kind of in this big picture, but it's not really helping you to like continue on the flow of life. You know, those are things that I think are, you know, are like things that you do in specific timelines in your life. Otherwise, you're just throwing yourself off into process. And I do have to say, living in multiple states, and this is my 7th treatment center. Which is the sacred number of Ayurveda. So I'm feeling like, okay, something's landing.
Wow.
It could still change whatever needs to be. But it's interesting to have had open 7 different treatment centers in 4 different locations, and to see the differences between cultures and just, you know, teaching globally, like how different cultures are and societies. And it's interesting, this particular kind of California, you know, society, we do process everything into the ethers. And then spin our adrenals up and spin ourselves so far out that it's like you feel useless and you're never going to be good enough. And then that's how you start presenting things in life, and everything gets anxiety-ridden and processed. And then we're all like, I just want to be healthy. And it's like we're not really just letting ourselves, you know, go back to breathing and move on. You know, so we have a lot of room to process here. And I think that that's, you know, sometimes a challenge. Every culture has its challenge. Every culture. But it is the challenge of this culture, is like not making everything words and process and willing to take on personal flow and continuum. So, these are some great overviews of just concepts in Ayurveda and concepts in like if we're gonna dive into this conversation, and now we're gonna go to page 5, so we go look at Vata Kapha, and then we'll back up. If you're not urinating, bladder. If you're not defecating, intestines. If you're not crying, emotion and nerves. If you're not belching, you're not letting gases move. It affects stomach. Orgasm, reproductive. Eating, digestive. So all of these things are going to be looking at which one could be the core imbalance. But we'll take a little time here with Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and just what are the core things we need to know before we move on and dive into this. Because really tomorrow, and part of today hopefully, because there's a lot to say, but this is the first class I'm teaching with some of the information in here that like literally even my students don't have in their class. This is like everything I've been working on in my book, and the working name of my book is called Body Mapping. It just seemed time to start taking pieces out of my book and kind of bringing it out into not just some big clinical program, but just starting to see how it plays out. I see it in clinic all the time. So I'm really excited because I've gone through every single organ.
Wow.
Every organ, every place in the body connected to that organ. What emotion, what symptoms, and what are the symptoms in hot, cold, wet, dry. So I've actually gone through medically and looked at symptoms and the function of each organ. Then I've gone into Ayurveda and Tibetan medicine and looked at the symptoms and the functions of that organ. And then I took all of those symptoms together and my experience of those organs, and then I made a cohesion of those three. Those were my 3 core researches, and then I broke it down into cold, dry, hot, and wet symptoms. So I just want you to know what's in the book. It's so exciting for me, and it's the first time, and I've been working on it for 4 years. I started it on my trip to Oaxaca. I left for 6 weeks to get serious about my book, and it really set forward. And this is some of the first information that came out.
Cool.
It's literally taken me 4 years to get it in this form in the book. Like it's been like my everything, just like making sure it's down to the details, and it'll be expanded on in the book for sure. But I have to tell you, it's quite exciting to have a group of people to kind of speak it to. First things first, Vata means change. Pitta means focus. Kapha means nourish. It's the art of change, focus, and nourish. If you could change, focus, and nourish as needed as you went through your life, moment to moment, everything would keep ticking and functioning in the way it knows how to. Tall order. Optimum idea. Okay? So again, it's going to be a matter of going, whoa, that's not ticking right. Let me back up here. Let me make some changes. But in its core function, it's the ability to change. Vata, the mantra is, the leaf never lands in the same place twice. The leaf never lands in the same place twice. Pitta is, fire rises in the body, just like in a house. Just like in a house. Fire rises in the body just like in a house.
Repeat this one more time.
Fire rises in the body just like in a house.
That's Pitta.
Yes. And in Kapha, wet like tears. How simple is that? Wet like tears. The emotional self. So these are the concepts. Now, I want to be clear that we will be talking a lot about too much Vata. And I'll say Vata imbalance or Vata provoked. If you look it up in a book, it's going to say Vata derangement. I don't like that word. It's a little deranged. But It's like, oh, that sounds serious. So just know that that's what you'll see in a book, and that's what that word means. Because if you go diving into traditional books, I want you to know how to find your way through them. They can be a little confusing because it's a translation of Sanskrit. So vata imbalance means high vata. Now someone can be low. You could be too much change, too much focus, too much nourish. And that's when you're like, oh, I'm too vata today. Oh, I'm so pitta. Oh, I'm so kapha today. And then you're like, I have too much of that. And it would mean you have too much change, too much focus, too much nourish. You can have too little. But then it starts looking like other doshas. So let me explain. You have vata, too much change, makes sense. Focus, nourish. If you have low vata, it means you have low ability to change, which means you look like kapha, sluggish. So low vata is what we call high kapha. And this is going to be a really important piece. I'll bring this around. So you can just write it down for now. But low vata, that's why nobody ever says, like, you're lacking vata. They'll say, you have too much kapha. But it's the same thing. I just want to be clear. If you have no fire or low fire, you are, without fire, you will be cold. Which is a word of vata, as we learn this theory. So without fire, you are more cold vata. And actually, you could be sluggish kapha, so you'd have to decide. Did you go cold vata, or did you go sluggish, muddy kapha? If you don't have fire, you're not liquefying the mud. You're not stirring the mud. Things liquefy with fire. If you don't have any fire, things are just going to sit there and coagulate. Or it's going to go inert and cold.
How is stubbornness?
Well, it depends. Like, the word stubborn is a kapha word. So if you're thinking sticky and coagulated and kind of stuck in the mud, definitely stubborn is more common in kapha. But if you think of somebody who's opinionated and won't give up their opinion, that's stubborn pitta, or what we call opinionated pitta. So you have to decide if it's from this like mind related, like I want to be in control, so I have decided this way and there's no way you're going to change it. It looks stubborn, but it's opinion. But stubborn with kapha is more like, come on, let's get a move on, let's get out of the house. And then that person who runs more kapha, you try to get him out of the house, and then it takes a half hour more. Because you said something. They hunker down. You know what I mean? They go like, oh, I'm going to hunker down in that mud a little bit more. And like, you just try to get me out of here. You know what I mean? And they're not supporting themselves, but that's the pattern that would be there in stubborn. And the more kapha somebody is, the more stubborn they do become. And it can be interesting, like you'll have to look at like how stubborn. Someone might hunker down and not get out of the house and are timely. Somebody else might be stubborn and stuck, and it's more all like not owning their body. So it can be kapha kind of heavy, and they just can't move their body, which I'm sure you see sometimes in yoga. It's like they can't quite get that going and that's a form of stubborn, not being able to change. So again, it's like you could be low vata, low change, and it looks like kapha. You could be low pitta, which means you win cold. And that could be vata, inert cold, like you're scared. Fire's like, I am fearless. And if you don't have your fire, you're like, oh, I don't know anymore. It's all contracted. Or it's going to be what's called kapha cool, which is kind of somebody who gets too sticky and just muddy. And then you have vata. High vata is too much nourish, meaning too much wet, waterlogged, too much mucus. Whereas when you look at too little kapha, if you don't have, now kapha is water, remember? If you have too little kapha, that means you have too little water, which is dry, vata. So sometimes, someone will come in and they already know somewhere your bed, and this is why this is important as a beginning. And then we'll just look at each one of them individually. But it's important because you could just be high or low pitta, like, oh, I'm so pitta today, I run so pitta, I gotta watch my fire. But sometimes we are combinations, and sometimes we're low in one, so someone will come to me and say, I am so vata, I'm so vata, I'm so dry, I'm so vata. And they know that's what they are. I recognize that they're onto something. I'm recognizing they're too vata too. But sometimes I have to say, do you know that the opposite of vata is kapha? Have you ever thought about nourishing your kapha so that it would balance your vata? Vata's over here. We always say vata, pitta, kapha. So if you're too light over here, don't you want to ground out your kapha and like you'll kind of get juicy and find the balancing, So instead of just being like, we have to change that vata, we have to change the vata. It's like, no, actually, we need to nourish what's dry. And anytime you nourish a body, you're giving them healthy kapha. Anytime you're taking excess mucus out of the body,